Hello, my name is Sean and I am the program specialist here at Martin Park Nature Center. And here at Martin Park we have a lot of different wildlife. We have many different species of birds, and some of my favorites personally are the owls. Now, one of the cool things about owls is that they produce what's called a pellet. So what that is when they eat things like mice or rodents, there are parts of it that they can't digest but they have to eat because they don't have forks they can pull their food apart like we do. So when they eat, say, a mouse, the bones, the teeth, and the fur are things they can't digest. So it gets to this organ called a gizzard, and once it gets through there, it just gets compacted, and they have to spit that back out. And this, called an owl pellet, which is what we're going to dissect today, is what that is. So these are the little pieces of whatever food the owl that we got these from got to eat. Now, there are a few different species that there are, like for example, barred owls are really big and they've got stripes all over them. There's the great horned owls, which have the two big ear tufts on them. And there's the barn owls, which have the bright white heart-shaped faces that you probably have seen. Now, these guys are really, really cool, and they're silent hunters. They fly around mostly at night, but some of them even hunt in the middle of the day. And they'll eat snakes, birds, rodents, as I just talked about, and a bunch of different other small animals. Now, with that being said, let's try and get into what you'll need for this. So I have 2 bowls and 1 plate. Make sure that these are things you're not going to use afterwards, like paper plates or paper bowls. Mostly because it's going to be very messy and you want to make sure you don't get sick from anything. So this guy is the pellet we're going to be dissecting, and we're going to use the plate for that. You want to be able to see what's going on, and I'm going to pull it apart in a little bit and we'll start to see all the hair and all the bones and stuff mixed in. So with that, this bowl, this pink one that I have over here, is where I'm going to be putting all the hair and sort of the fluff inside of it. The stuff that's going to be holding it together, it's basically going to be like the trash stuff. We're not looking for those. And on this one is where I'll put the bones that we find. Like for example, teeth or skulls, or even some people have even found like whole feathers inside of their pellets. Something else you guys are going to need is something to pull it apart with. Now, I'm using gloves. If you can't find gloves, or if you prefer not to, make sure you wash your hands after you're done. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or face or anything, because as we mentioned earlier, this is going to be a very messy process, and you want to make sure you keep everything as clean as possible. You don't want anyone getting sick. So we have the dissection tweezers, and these are something you're probably going to need. Now, if you don't have access to these ones, which are a little bigger, you can also use the regular tweezers that you can probably find in your parents' bathrooms or things, but make sure you get their permission first. And you're also going to need something thin to be able to hold it down with, because part of this is it's a round thing you have to pull apart, and it can get a little weird. Now, you can use either an old pencil and just sort of use that to stick into it and pull, or what I'm going to be doing is just using 2 different tweezers. That way I can hold both parts equally. One of the things you're going to do is, while we're going through this, make sure you are very careful. The bones of these animals have already been partially digested and are also very, very small and brittle. You don't want to break anything, so when you grab things, make sure you grab them tightly, but not tight enough to break it. And you're going to pull it out, and then we'll talk about how to go through these in a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to get started and unwrap these pellets. So what you want to do is be very careful, because you don't want to rip it apart when you're going around. Grab the foil and slowly peel it out. See, on this one, you can already kind of see there are some pieces on the edge of it. Once we get this out, set that on your plate. We'll move this to the side. So this is the one time that I'll probably use the stick tool that we're gonna have. Hold it on the sides and just enough to get in. You can kind of see that there's a bunch of fuzz on the outside of yours. Like this one, whatever this owl ate probably had a lot of fur on it. Here we go. Now, some parts of this can be very, very hard to pull apart, but you want to make sure you're being very careful not to break anything or just stab straight into it. Oh, so there's a lot of fur in this. and I just found a bone. So let's grab it and I'll show you guys this little tiny bone. There you go. So this is a little piece of the vertebrae, like the spine. There you go. And I'll set that in the blue bucket. So as we're doing this, you want to make sure that you are looking to find any small white specks inside of it. For example, this has a lot of crushed bone pieces on the outsides, but inside, now this is really cool. I hold it up, you guys might be able to see it. There's a lot of bones just right here in this little circle. A lot of fur. This owl ate a very fuzzy animal. There's another piece of the spine. And here's where you want to use the tweezers. So if you see things like this, grab your tweezers and start to pull some of the hair out very slowly from around whatever you can find. Like for example, in that circle I just showed you guys with all the bones. Just reach down next to them and try and pull some of the fur out from around it, because it's going to make it easier to see what it is we have, and it'll also make it easier to pull it out very gently. So, with that, the hardest part about these is trying to break that outside shell, because it's hardened around because it had to spit it out. So all this fur sort of whirled around itself, got coated in spit or digestive enzymes, and then was spit out. And so now this outer part's a little harder. So you want to grab, if you can find a hole in the side of it, grab very gently, kind of like peeling an orange. Grab and very slowly pull. And you can sort of get this outer part peeled up. So there's something right here that's really, really tough. I'm gonna go around that, and I'm not gonna pull that apart yet. We're gonna wait and see if I can pull some of the hair out from around it to make it easier to see either what it is, or at least to get to it. There you go. There's a larger piece of the vertebrae, and I'll show that to you guys. Now, I can kind of see it, but we're gonna dig a little bit deeper before we can get to it first, because it is really deep in here, and it might be square in the middle. These tufts of fur. Now on some of you guys, some of the ones you guys have, there will be bones sticking out the side of them. Now those ones you have to be very careful about, because they can easily break. So you want to try and get the hair around that, pulled out, and then using your tweezers tool, grab and very slowly pull the fur from the sides of that. And once it's loose enough to grab, you can reach in, grab it, wiggle just a little bit. And I'd accidentally snapped it. So I did exactly what I told you guys not to do. I pulled it when it was too early, but we'll get to that in just a second. So it's kind of like deconstructing a puzzle. Now also, before you toss any of these parts out, make sure you feel around them and see if there's not just a bone hiding inside of the bunches of fur. Like for example this, it looks like just this tuft of fur. If you feel it, there's actually a bone on the inside, and we're gonna try and work that bone out by pulling the fur off of it. So one of the cool things about this is owls eat a lot of different foods. So this one was probably it looks like it could have been a rabbit, maybe it was a large rodent, because this is very, like the fur is relatively long, and it's really, really fuzzy. But they eat a lot of different things. Like for example, some owls, like the small screech owls, they'll even eat small fish, they'll grab crabs, they'll grab crustaceans like crawfish, and you can grab those. And even you can tell what they've eaten just by the color of them with some birds. So if they've eaten like crabs or crustaceans, just like lobsters, when you cook them, they turn red. Their pellets will actually be a light pinkish red color. Now this bone is gonna be very small, and I can already feel it. Now this is why we say wear gloves or have a plate, because you see all of this mess. Now there's little tiny fragments of bones that have already been digested and broken up inside the owl, and some of them were chipped or anything. So this could all be very, very messy, and that's why we ask you wear gloves, put it on a plate or something else. And then the waste products, all of these pieces, can be tossed over to the side, like that, to try and keep your workspace a little cleaner. That way it's easier to spot something if you see it. Guys, look, there's a larger bone right in the middle of that. And we're gonna try, and that might be one of the last ones we can remove because it's dead center, so it might be a little harder to get to. But we're gonna try to, and we might get to it a little bit. Here is something really interesting. Now this, if I were just quickly looking through, I would have thought it was a piece of the rib. But if you look closely, it's got little tiny bumps on it. So to me, it looks like it's a piece of twig. It even bends as if it's wood. So that's really interesting. So whatever this owl ate, it might have consumed just a little bit of wood, like a small twig that maybe the animal had in its mouth when it was being eaten. It's really, really helpful for them to be able to spit out these pellets, because if not, all of that will just be stuck inside of their stomachs and they can't digest it, and it'd be very painful for them to try and poop this out. It wouldn't be too good. But here is a really cool bone. Let's see if we can get this out. That is a thigh bone, or the femur of whatever animal this thing ate. Now it's relatively small, true, but it's a little bigger compared to some things. So it might be like a large rat, or I don't think it could be a rabbit anymore. I think it was a larger rat because it's a bit bigger, but not big enough to be a rabbit leg. Now mind you, some of these pellets won't have the whole body in it. Many of these might come from nesting owls, so they might have shared the body with their chicks, or the chicks might have even got just bits and pieces of one prey animal. So if you're looking for the whole skeleton of an owl, of like whatever animal it ate, that's gonna be very hard to find. And it could also be that it might have spit out a pellet after eating a little bit of a meal and then continued eating, so it might have been split between 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 different pellets. So don't be disheartened if you can't find the whole body. Not many people can, and if you do find the whole body, that's really, really cool. Ah, now this is a really cool one. So this is the side of a jaw. So that means that there's a chance that the top part of the jaw, which is basically the skull section of it, is in here too. So we want to be very careful and look closely to see if we can find that. Now off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it is, but we'll look at the diagram later and we'll try and identify it. Oh, so here's a very, very, very fragile bone. So right here, this is the shoulder blade. Now, if you look on it, it's paper thin, and that means it's very, very easy to break when you're doing these. So it's very hard to find those intact. Now this is another lower jaw. So whatever this owl had, it had 2 different things. So you see, that's much bigger, and that's probably from the rat. There we go. So we've got the other side of the jaw. So we've almost freed that bit of the skull up. We just need to get all the stuff from around the bottom of it, and then we might be able to pull it out safely. Now here's another piece of wood. Huh, interesting. Make sure that when you grab things, they're only the fur, because any part of that could break. And if it does break, it's okay. There's a lot of pieces here, and it's very, very fragile. See just the front end of it? Be very careful when pulling the hair out of the skull. Use very, very tiny grabs. You just grab tiny tufts of hair and pull out. It's going to take a little while, but it helps show where all the edges are, and that shows you where you can start pulling things. If you do happen to have one that has a skull in it, it's really, really cool to find. I'm going to try and get this little tuft of hair out of this eye socket, and then I'll put it up, and this might be a bad idea, but I'm going to try it anyways. The dome of the skull right here. Inside of here, that's where the brain would be, and right there, that's where the eyes are. So this one isn't just the jaw, it's the whole skull. From an animal that has very, very strong jaws, so it might have been like a mole or something like that. Because it's still got those long teeth like a rodent. But these jaws, the lower jaws are really, really big and heavy. Because that one's really small, it's also much more fragile. So make sure while you're doing this, you keep an eye on everything that you have. You're gonna make sure you either put it in a bowl or set it to the side in a safe place, because many of these bones are very small and can wind up rolling off. If it's windy, make sure you're either doing this inside or in an enclosed area, because they're so small and light they can actually be blown off of whatever surface you're doing this from. So make sure you keep an eye on where things are, because cleanup is very important. That's a longer bone. So that's probably from the rat. So this owl ate really well, because there's a lot of pieces of rat. There's a mole looking animal, it might be a vole in here. And there's even small bits of, and honestly a lot of this fur is so dense, I wouldn't be surprised if it even had pieces of rabbit in it. Now these are really, really tiny, and I'm not sure how to show them to you because I can't grab them with the tweezers because they'll break. But right on the edges of this are little pieces of the rib cage. And they're extremely delicate. Here's another little tiny piece. Now that's a part of the animal, and that's really, really cool. Now this, interesting shape. I'm curious what it could be. Another rib cage, or rib bone. Oh, this one is a leg bone, or an arm bone. Here we go. See that sort of S-shaped curve it has on it? So there's a large bone in here. Not sure what that one is, but we're gonna try and dig and get it out. So here's the other femur from that one we found just a little bit earlier. This big hunk of something right here. I'm not sure what it is. If you look right down in the middle of that, let's see if I can get a little closer. There you go. piece of leg. So there's a smaller version of that bone we found earlier that was kind of a mystery. So this probably came from the small animal that it ate too. But right here, so this is something that's kind of cool. This is a piece of the spine, but these bones aren't loose like the other ones, they're fused together. Ooh. Oh, this is really cool. So in your arms, like your forearms and your legs, you actually have two bones in there, and some animals have one, but it's fused almost like it's almost completely. Now this is a great example of that because you can kind of see where at the bottom it starts as two, it blends into one, and then it comes out the top as two different bones. Let's see if you can look down on it. It splits apart and then comes back together, so it's really, really cool to see that. Now another common small bone that you'll find in a lot of these are just the teeth of the animals that they ate. Because those are another thing that they can't digest, because teeth are basically just bones that you have in your mouth. Here's the other one. We're going to set this clump down because there's a bunch of bones inside of that. But there's a bunch of little tiny stuff in this side. And there's one specific one that I noticed that looks like it could be something pretty interesting. It is. Another piece of jaw. So this owl probably ate at least 3 different small mammals before it made this pellet. Oop. And this is why we say don't grab the top of the skull, because as I tried to pull whatever this skull was, that piece of bone fell out. Those bones are very, very, very fragile. So now I just have the fragments of it. But here's part of the top. You can see the little tiny orange tooth. See if we can find any other parts of it. And here's 3 pieces of the ribs. See if I can get the fur to pop off a bit. There's a big bunch of fur, and underneath it are a bunch of small bones. So a lot of those bones are pieces of the rib cages from all three of the different animals that it ate. There's little pieces of spine inside of it. There's a bunch of tufts of fur. And I think I might even see that other piece of the jaw if I can get to it. So this owl ate quite a bit before it made this pellet. We found at least 3 different skulls and a few pieces of legs, quite a few different shoulder blades. But yeah, so inside of each pellet might not be a whole body. Maybe not each one of you will get a skull, because as I said before, many of these might have come from babies. The parents would tear the food apart and give different parts to their young, so not everyone might get a skull, not everyone will get a leg or different parts of the body, but each one of them will have something really cool in it. So now that we're done, we're going to show a bit of the bone identification. So here we have the skulls, the mandible, which is the lower jaw, scapula, which is the shoulder blade, the front limbs, vertebrae, the ribs, which are very, very tiny, the hind limbs, and the pelvis, which that's that little bone we saw earlier that we couldn't identify. So what you want to do is take yours and try and organize them along this. You can pause the video and look at this and hold it up to the bones that you found. And I'm going to show you guys what we found down below. So here we have the skulls that we found, and these are the pelvis, and they kind of look like a P shape. That's an easy way to remember it. These are some of the leg bones, the jaws, the front limbs, the scapula, the only one we found, and they're very, very tiny. We actually found 2 of them, but because those bones are so thin, we broke the other one. There's the rib cage, and then these are the few pieces of vertebrae. So you can find a whole bunch of different stuff. Some people might have some mammals, which are these guys, little rodents, and one of you guys might even have a bird inside of it, so you might see a piece of the beak. So it's really cool. So if you guys do find anything really cool that you want to keep, like for example this skull, what you want to do is with your parents' help, take it and put them in a bowl similar to the bowl we use to keep all these in a 10-to-1 bleach solution. Make sure you don't get it on your hands or your clothes because it can stain your clothes and hurt your fingers. But let that sit in that bowl overnight, and once it's the morning, you can take that, drain it, and rinse everything off very well. Make sure to still be careful because these bones are still very fragile, and after that point, they should be clean. Now, with that, you can keep them, you can put them in a jar that we can look at later. So yeah. Thank you guys for joining me here at Martin Park while we dissected this owl pellet. I hope you enjoyed the program, and I hope to see you guys back here. If you are interested in birds or even specifically just owls, please come and check us out. We have tons of different educational opportunities for you guys. Or if you just have any question about other wildlife, we'd love to hear all about it. So with that, hope you guys have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being a part of us.